Alright, for the second part of our video lesson of 8-2, we're going to look at two graphing examples. Before we go too much further on this one, I want you to notice on this graph, I went kind of label them by twos. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you'll see why as we graph it out. It'll be better to space these ones out. You'll be able to see it better. So for this example number 4, we've got f of x, which remember is kind of like y. Y equals x squared plus 8x plus 12. First off, we need to write the equation for the line of symmetry. Remember, that's our negative b over 2a. Start replacing things. B was this positive 8, so negative b is going to be negative 8. A, there's nothing outside of this x squared, so it's 1. So 2a means 2 times 1. Simplify it down, negative 8 over 2. Negative 8 divided by 2 is in fact negative 4. So the equation would be x equals negative 4. I want to go ahead and just draw that in actually. This is our, there we go, axis of symmetry. This is going to be the mirror spot, this line vertically up and down here. Now we need to determine the coordinate of the vertex. Well, we've got our x value of the vertex. We just plug that into our original equation to find the y value. So instead of x squared, it's negative 4 squared. Instead of 8 times x, it's 8 times negative 4. And just add everything up there. Negative 4 squared is going to be 16. It's not negative 16, because remember, negative times a negative is a positive. 8 times negative 4 is negative 32, so we have 16 plus negative 32 plus 12. 16 plus negative 32 is going to be negative 16, plus 12 makes a negative 4. So y is going to be negative 4, which means our vertex is going to be at negative 4, negative 4. I'm going to draw that in right now with green. This would be at negative 2, this would be at negative 4, so our vertex is going to be this spot right here. State if it has a maximum or a minimum. Sorry, this should be or, not of. Because this a value is positive, it's a positive one, that means this is going to be opening upwards, which means that it has a lowest point. It has a minimum. Go ahead and underline or circle that word minimum. We're going to factor the equation and find the x-intercepts. Now, as we look at our equation here, remember a is 1 in this case, we're going to do the AC method of factoring. A times c means 1 times 12 gives us 12. Now we want the factors of 12 that would add up to 8. So things like 1 and 12, or 2 and 6, or 3 and 4. Which ones of those would add up to 8? Would be 2 and 6. So when we split this up, we would call it y equals x squared. Instead of plus this 8x, we're splitting it into 2 and 6. So y equals x squared plus 2x plus 6x plus 12. Because this 6 and 2 would add up to 8x. Now we can do factor by grouping. Here's one group. Here is another group. Factor each of those individually. Take the x out of these two, and we'd get x on the outside times x plus 2. Take the 6 out of these two, and we'd get 6 on the outside, x plus 2. In both cases, we have x plus 2 as being inside our parentheses. So our factors are going to be x plus 2 times the factor x plus 6. Here are the red ones, here are the blue ones. Now that we've changed this equation here into a factored form, it'll be easier to set it equal to 0. I'm literally just going to take y, replace it with 0, which means we're on this line, the x-axis. And for this to be true, for x plus 2 times x plus 6 to equal 0, there's going to be two solutions, one where the red factor is 0, one where the blue factor is 0. This is a lot of what we did in 8-1. So remember, the two cases would be x equals -2 and x equals -6. -2 would make this 0, -6 would make this 0. So if those are our x-intercepts, I'm going to plot those two on our graph. One here at -2, one here at -6. Find the y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is always this last number. It's c, so we have 12. The y-intercept is at 12. And this is part of why we wanted it to go by 2, so we could reach all the way up to this y-intercept. The last thing we need to do is graph the whole equation. Well, we've got a good start here. We've got a couple of these plotted out. Now remember, if this is a mirror, we should be able to take this point, go over 1, 2, so then we go over 1, 2 more, and there should be the point again, mirrored on the other side. So now we should be able to connect everything into a parabola. And that would be our graph of the parabola then. Example 5 is very similar to example 4. We're starting with our equation y equals 2x squared minus 8x plus 6. And we're just going to work through the parts that it asks for us until we have a graph of the equation. This one, I'm not doing scaling by 2. They're all just jumping by 1s. So let's get started here. Part A, write the equation for the line of symmetry. Remember, that's -b over 2a. B in this case is -8. So -b is going to be +8. A in this case is 2. So 2 times 2 is what's on bottom. Simplifying 2 times 2, we'd get 4, so we have 8 over 4. And 8 over 4 is, of course, +2. So our line of symmetry is going to be x equals 2. Oops. I wanted that in red. There we go. There is our mirror line, the axis of symmetry. Now we need to determine the coordinate of the vertex. We know the x part is going to be 2, so we just plug that into our original equation. Everywhere we see an x, we just replace it with 2. Now from here, 2 squared is going to be 4. 8 times 2 is going to be 16. So we have 2 times 4 minus 16, and then add 6. 2 times 4 is, of course, 8. So we have 8 minus 16 plus 6. Well, 8 minus 16 is going to be -8. Add on that 6, and we're up at -2. So our vertex is at the point 2, -2. So where x is 2 on the line, and go down 1, 2. Here's our vertex. State if this has a maximum or a minimum. Again, our A is positive, so this is going to be opening upwards. So again, this one has a minimum. Factor the equation and find the x-intercepts. Before we go on factoring this one, I do want to show you one thing. We can take out the greatest common factor. Each of these terms we can take a 2 out of. So that's going to be our very first step in factoring, is take the 2 out of each piece. So we have a 2 on the outside, and what's left on the inside is x squared minus 4x plus 3. Now we can use our AC method of factoring and say that we have a 1 in front of this x squared, and our c value is 3. So a times c is going to be 3. From here, we would ask, okay, what are the factors of 3 that might add up to -4? Well, the only factors of 3 are 1 and 3. Because we have a positive AC, a times c made a +3. Either these are both positive or they're both negative. In this case, they're going to both be negative, because -1 plus -3 is -4. So when we replace everything in our equation, we'd have y equals 2 on the outside still. That was our greatest common factor. x squared minus 1x minus 3x plus 3. This 4x became the 1x and the 3x. We split it up right here. Now, like before, we can factor what's on the inside of this by grouping. So, let me group that and factor it. There's still 2, that greatest common factor on the outside. From this group, we can take the x out and leave x minus 1. On this group, we can take a negative 3 out. That's why it's a minus 3. And we would get x minus 1. Because negative 3 times negative 1 is this positive 3. So, putting all our factors out there then, we've got one piece as this greatest common factor of 2, a red piece, x minus 1, and the blue piece, x minus 3. Now, unlike before, we now have 3 pieces. And any of them could be 0 to change our y to 0. Because remember, we're looking for the x-intercept, so we can just replace y with 0. Well, 2 can't be 0, so we don't have to worry about that. If we wanted our red factor to be 0, that would mean that x has to be 1. If we wanted our blue factor to be 0, then x would have to be 3. So those would be our x-intercepts, 1 and 3. I'm going to plot them right here, 1 and 3. Find the y-intercept. Again, that's always this last number. Don't use this last number because you already factored out the 2. Always use the original, which would be 6. Which means then we would plot 6 as our y-intercept. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because this is our mirror line, we have to go over 1, 2. So we'd go another 1, 2 away from it to find another point there. So now we have some points. Simply connect them to graph the equation. Oops, kind of missed that. There we go. That would be our parabola then. Simply connecting those points together. And that'll wrap it up for 8.2.